In this video, I'm going to show you how I edit raw images in Lightroom Classic and my 4 favorite plugins. Hello amigos, I'm Pablo Garcia, the engineer photographer. Today I'm going to show you how I process images in Lightroom Classic using Lightroom and my 4 favorite plugins and why and where I use those plugins. Now, I've been using Lightroom for quite a long time. Lightroom version 1 came out in 2007 and version 2 in 2008. I think I bought version 2 sometime in early 2009. So I'm coming at 14 years using Lightroom. Since that initial version 1 and version 2, there had been a lot of improvement. Things like texture and clarity, mask, healing, and more capabilities with every single revision. But Lightroom also has a lot more competition nowadays. You have many great editing programs. Programs like Capture One, On1 Photo Raw, DxO Photo Lab 6 now, and Luminar Neo, among others. We also have more artificial intelligence capabilities that are coming into our tools to try to make our editing job easier. Now, Lightroom has been evolving and Lightroom is getting more and more powerful. But there are 2 areas in which I think Lightroom has some weaknesses, especially when we compare today's Lightroom with some of the competition. And one of those areas is the healing brush. Yes, Adobe added recently content-aware healing to Lightroom, but frankly, the results to me had been kind of uneven, hit and miss. I would like to see more consistent results when using the content-aware healing portion of the brush. Another area is sharpening and noise correction. For images that are well focused and have low noise, like low ISOs, what is in Lightroom works. But many times, many of our images don't fit in that bucket. And that's where using some of the plugins like Topaz, Denoise, and Sharpen, or Photo AI, or DxO, Pure Raw 2, among others, really comes into play. And I would like to see Adobe bring some more of the technologies that they have in Photoshop into Lightroom. Now, as we subscribe to Creative Cloud in Adobe, we have access not only to Lightroom, but also to Photoshop. And yes, more and more I find myself going to Photoshop less, but there's still stuff in Photoshop I would like to see directly in Lightroom. Among those things like better content aware and fill, not only for healing, but maybe extending canvas, for example. We also have better tools in Photoshop to adjust the edges of the mask. Yes, we don't have masks in Lightroom and we have the ability to make adjustments, but fine refinement of the edges of the mask is still a lot better in Photoshop. We also can think of the mask in Lightroom as a version of layers, where we can not only apply a mask, but we also can apply edits to the areas affected by the mask. But there are times in which I would like to combine images, like if I'm doing manual blending of exposure or focus. Let's say I'm doing a landscape and I want to have perfect focus from the front of the image all the way to the back. So I may have 3 or 4 images, one focus right up front, one on the middle, one on the back, and I want to be able to blend them manually in the tool of my choice. Today, I had to go from Lightroom to Photoshop in order to do that. And the last area is in Photoshop. Adobe has been adding a new area called neural filters. They use artificial intelligence to process images. Some of them are still in beta, but I would like to see those neural filters added into Lightroom. Now, let's go to the workflow. So I start by evaluating the image. What does my raw image need? And I fit it into 1 or 3 buckets. There are images that have great focus and have very little or no noise, and they also have good light. The second bucket are images that have great focus, but are going to have medium or high noise, or perhaps the image is dark. Maybe it's taken in the early hours and I need to be able to open the shadows, and there's a lot of noise in the shadows usually. Or perhaps I took that image indoors, like in a cathedral or church, an old building, some ruins, and I want to be able again to open the shadow. Moderate to high noise or dark. And the last bin for me are images in which I don't have a great focus. The focus is a little soft. Perhaps it was raining, I had snow, and the autofocus on the camera wasn't very precise. There are times in which there are operator error, especially if we're doing action shot like birds in flight. And for those type of images, they may or may not have noise, and they may be having good light or not. But that bin is things are a little bit soft. For the first bin, I do my global edits in Lightroom Classic. I can adjust blacks and whites and highlights and contrast, color temperature, and the auto buttons now in Lightroom work actually pretty well. And if I'm being a little bit lazy, I may just hit the auto buttons as a good place to start. For the second bin, my plugin of choice is DxO Pure Raw 2. I've been using it for quite some time. I started with Pure Raw 1, and that version did not work well for me. Half of the time I was getting back just a black image. So a lot of stability issues and results that were uneven with Pure Raw 1. But Pure Raw 2, that's not the case. The AI technology in Pure Raw 2 is really good. For my Canon RAW files, it works really well and it's very simple to use, and it's one of those plugins in which it's very simple to send the RAW file directly from Lightroom to Pure Raw 2, process it there, not only remove noise, I think it enhances the detail that is inherent in the image, and you also have the choice to apply the great optics corrections that DxO is known for. And the resulting file is a DNG file that has a lot of information, and it can be considered almost like it was a RAW file. For the third bin, for soft focus images, my current tool of choice is Topaz Photo AI. Photo AI came out 3 or 4 months ago. Topaz basically is taking the technologies from Topaz Sharpen, the noise, and Gigapixel, and putting them all into one package with more automation, something that they call the autopilot. But it still gives you a good degree of manual control. Now, I also did a review of Pure Raw and Photo AI that I'll put at the end of this video. One area of Topaz Photo AI that I think this tool needs development is the brush. I want to be able to create a mask where the sharpening effect is going to be applied. Topaz is going to create an automatic mask. It gives you an AI brush where you can add or remove to that automated mask or start from scratch. But that mask brush still needs some work. And that was one of my conclusions from my recent review. But I'm sure Topaz is working on it. Those are the 3 different paths. So now I have my global edits. What's next? What I do is I evaluate, are there any issues that I cannot fix in Lightroom? Maybe distractions. Maybe I need to extend canvas. Maybe I need to do something else that I don't know how to do in Lightroom, or Lightroom is not capable of doing. And if the answer is no, then I do my final edit in Lightroom Classic. I'm going to pay attention to things like light, color, and detail to help guide the viewer's eye around the image. I'm going to use mask, I'm going to use local adjustments, and trying to create a final image. If there are issues that I cannot fix in Lightroom, then I'm going to send it to Photoshop. And I'm going to do those corrections in Photoshop using layers and using perhaps the content aware fill, content aware move, and some of the other tools that are available in Photoshop. And coming out of Photoshop, I have a PSD file, and then I'll do my final edits to that image. Now, I only show you 2 of my plugins, and there are times in which I have a photo that I really like that results in Lightroom, but I feel I can give it something extra. If it's a color image, the extra is going to come in from Nik Color Effects. Nik is another suite of plugins also available from DxO, and Color Effects is one of my favorites. There are a number of filters that I like there. So what I'm going to do from the version that I had in Lightroom is I'm going to create a virtual copy, and I'm going to remove any texture, clarity, or vignetting that I apply in Lightroom. And I do that because I think there are better options with some of the filters that are available in Color Effects. Things like Detail Extractor, applying foliage enhancements. There are a number of filters that I like in Color Effects, but in that virtual copy, I'm going to prepare it, and I don't want to duplicate what I did in Lightroom. And the other one is there are times in which I want to create a black and white version. And my tool of choice today is Nik Silver Effects. I think it's the best plugin today for doing black and white. I'm also going to create a virtual copy. I'm going to reduce contrast, but increase color saturation in the virtual copy before I send it to Nik. Now, one of the advantages of the Nik Color Effects and Silver Effects is when I say the TIFF, it gives you the option to use the multi-page format. In multi-page, it doubles the file size, but it saves the original TIFF that came from Lightroom. It's going to save the process TIFF that you did with the plugin, and it's going to save the instructions that got you from one to the other. So when you reopen that file, you basically got back to where you were. You can edit, make changes, and so on. It's not like you lost what you did. Multi-page is a great addition to the Nik tools. So that's my workflow. This covers over 90% of the images that I do. Now, there are other plugins that I have in my arsenal. Topaz Denoise, Gigapixel, and Sharpen are plugins that I had for quite some time, and actually Photo AI was free to me because I already own those plugins. And those three plugins, I hope Topaz continues to enhance because they give you a higher degree of manual control the Photo AI has. Another great plugin that I've been using more and more is Helken Focus, because I've been getting into macro photography and trying to do focus stacking, focus blending. In Photoshop, I've been getting kind of inconsistent results, and a friend of mine recommended Helken, and I can use it as a plugin in Lightroom. I can take the Lightroom images, perhaps doing some global edits in Lightroom, selecting all the images and sending them to Helken, and then bringing back an integrated TIFF for my final edit. Highly recommend Helken Focus. Now, there are other plugins that I have, but I need to have more time with them before I make up my mind. ON1 has a number of plugins. They have their full editor, Photo Raw, but they also have plugins like No Noise, FX, and HDR. I find the interface from the ON1 products a little more complex and a little more difficult to learn, especially for the casual user like me. If I were using them all the time, that probably wouldn't be an issue, but for occasional use, I just find it a little bit too much. Another software that I have is Luminar Neo from Skylum. Skylum came out with Luminar, and then they changed it to Luminar AI, and then now is Luminar Neo. That is really built around artificial intelligence with some degree of manual controls. I think they're still trying to find their place in the marketplace. But I find it very intriguing, and I need to play with it a little bit more. It's a full editor, but you can use it as a plugin in Lightroom. And it also has the idea of extensions where you can buy additional capabilities, like for doing sharpening or focus stacking, that Skylum is producing, and you can buy them all or only buy the ones that you want to use. So Luminar Neo is intriguing, and I'll probably be doing a few videos on Luminar Neo in the future. And what are your recommendations? There are many other plugins out there. I'm telling you about my 4 favorite ones that I use all the time, and some of the other ones that are in my arsenal that I use occasionally, or I may want to start learning more. But what are your recommendations? Well, amigos, that was my workflow. I'll leave you here with these 2 videos on DxO Pure Raw and the latest one on Topaz Photo AI version 1.1.0. I hope you like this video. Don't forget to subscribe. Send me your comments. I answer every comment. Give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time.